Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Doctors of Running podcast, where we, a group of doctors of physical therapy, discuss the art and science of running and the stuff that we put on our feet. Today at the round table is founder of Doctors of Running, Dr. Matthew Klein. We also have Dr. David Salas and myself. I'll be hosting. I'm Nathan Brown. And the three of us today are going to be going through a mailbag where we sift through all of the emails we get from you all and pull out some of them to try to answer your questions. And I would say more appropriately, we respond to them in a way that we can't directly answer a lot of these questions because many of them are very medically based and deal with very specific situations, which, as you hopefully know at this point, we cannot provide medical advice here. It's way too complex. But we love our mailbag episodes. It'll be fun for us to dig through some of your really good questions, and they're great launching pads for discussions on other things. But before we go into the mailbag, we want to introduce a couple things that are going on with us at Doctors of Running. One is that we just have released our first merch shop. So there is Doctors of Running merch available to you all if you are interested. And so I think the easiest way to get there is just in your search engine, Google, or type in Doctors of Running merch. First thing that'll pop up is a link to our website, and from there you'll be able to get to the shop to be able to buy some of the stuff that we have. What we primarily have now is some of our logoed apparel for t-shirts and a hoodie, so you can check that stuff out, as well as obviously an homage to Matt Klein and talking about how much importance there is in the heel bevel of a shoe. So there's a Got Heel Bevel shirt for y'all. It is important. We know this. If you've been listening, you've heard it maybe 2,000 times, which is an appropriate amount. Anyway, we would love for y'all to check it out. We hope that in this kind of holiday season, it's a nice thing that you can add to your list of things that you may get or think about having someone get for you. Otherwise, we also want to thank Scratch for always powering this podcast. I know for myself, because we're supplied with this stuff now in a way that makes it easier to have, I've been able to use it more often on runs that I normally wouldn't. And I just like having that availability. Still super easy on my stomach, which is really nice. So, but Matt, what do you got?
I will say, even though they are nicer to give us stuff, I still buy a lot of my own. As I've gotten older and some other things have occurred, I've really enjoyed on-run nutrition and having a good steady, not the highest thing. So like if you don't like excessive carbohydrates, they also have the everyday drink mix, which is awesome. And I've kept that in a majority of my even fluids, which has been very, very, very helpful recently. So it's been sweet.
It's really good. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of jump into our mailbag episode. And so we have a number of questions from you all. And just as a reminder, these cannot be taken as medical advice, but we want to walk through things. And our first question is from Bruno, and Bruno is asking about plates and the use of plates. So this is what Bruno says. Hello, post-op hallux rigidus patient here. So if you don't know what hallux rigidus is, it's where they did probably for him a pinning through the big toe joint, which prevents it from moving anymore. The doctor recommends stiff-soled with rockers, as you're probably well aware. Currently using my Endorphin Shift 3, but mostly for walking. I avoid running because I already play tennis, and the doctor says that's about all I can take. Anyway, ran in the Nike Ultrafly Trail these days, super roomy toe box and stiff forefoot, which in theory fits the prescription. But I've heard in many places that carbon-plated shoes are actually terrible for walking. Confused on what to do. Thanks. So I guess the question is basically, are carbon-plated shoes an appropriate modality or appropriate option for walking, and why or why not? And why may he have heard that they're a bad idea? What you got, Matt?
I'm going to start at the end there that I think carbon-plated racing shoes that are designed for fast running are a poor idea for walking. They are not designed for that speed or that kind of gait. And talking with some people recently at some companies going, yeah, we don't test those on a lot of there are faster shoes on anybody but elite and sub-elite athletes. So that's not the population that's in mind. Now, if you move away from that niche category, a plate serves to create additional, frequently longitudinal, or sometimes side to side. Sorry. I'm dying. They serve to create stiffness, either longitudinally, front to back, side to side. They add rigidity to the sole. And there are lots of shoes out there that are daily training and walking shoes that are actually featuring plates now more than ever. Glide Ride Max from Asics has a plate, right? I always mess that up. and always forget. But
It
it's
does.
a shoe that a lot of people really
Not
enjoy.
carbon, but yes.
A lot of people enjoy it for walking. It was designed with a variety of people in mind, and some people might find that great. Although I personally like the older versions because even though there's a plate in the new one, it's still weirdly flexible. A lot of shoes like the Ultrafly from Nike, they weren't necessary. They were, but they're tested on a large group of people. Everybody from your recreational person and to your faster trail runner, which trail runners inherently are going to have some walking and hiking involved. You can't have a shoe that's so aggressive that you can't handle walking because that is a normal part of trail running. It happens because there's something so steep, you're fatigued. It's designed for 100+ mile events. So that kind of shoe is actually going to be fine. So yes, plates in certain shoes, if they're very aggressive, might not be appropriate, but plates in shoes that are designated as long distance run hike or daily trainers actually might be totally fine. So I would make sure you're picking the right category and knowing that a plate might be an additional thing that you might look for in that category because you need additional stiffness. But that plate needs to match your new mechanics, because if it's creating a flex, just because there's a plate doesn't mean it won't flex. If it's creating a flex point at the joint that you no longer have use of, which we're assuming, that might not work. So make sure it feels comfortable.
Yeah, I think the only thing I'd add to this is the old way of understanding plates was that plates were these carbon plates were only utilized for the racing shoes, as Matt said, where now plates are thrown in everything. They're just kind of everywhere. So it's not the plate that makes them bad for walking. It's all the other geometric design. Like think about the Vaporfly, super narrow platform, weird rocker. It's got a lot going on. Not great for walking, but a lot of these other shoes are going to be just fine. I even think Andrea just bought a pair of shoes on her own. I think it's Anu, AHNU. Anu, yeah. And it's made for walking, carbon-plated walking shoe. So it's not the carbon plate that's the problem. It's the other stuff that just isn't appropriate. I think what also for you, Bruno, to consider is what does the plate have in terms of the geometry, not from a rocker perspective, which is fine, but it's from the toe spring perspective. Because if there is toe spring and a carbon plate, it's just going to hold you in the extension that you don't have. That's where you might have issues, where the shoe that you said, the Ultrafly, isn't super high toe spring, but some other carbon plated shoes are. So that's the only other consideration I would make. David, do you have anything?
No, I think you guys hit pretty much all of it. I was going to bring up Anu, and then the other one is the Hoka Transport X. That's also carbon plated. That's meant to kind of be a walking / kind of run, like a little bit of an everything shoe, but it's definitely trying to hit that kind of walking category and translate into some lifestyle wear. So there's definitely shoes out there that are plated, that you don't have to necessarily run in and can be good for walking and standing as well. But you guys hit it. I think mainly looking at the geometric changes in the shoe, how that works with standing and walking versus running fast are two very different things. So looking at how that impacts how you stand, walk, move, and then as everything, uppers, and how well it holds your foot to the platform, because those racing shoes don't always have the most stable platforms and numbers compared to training shoes. So, yeah.
Perfect. Well, let's move on to our next question. And this is from Nathan, not me, some other Nathan that I don't know, asks about Matt, what you got?
Totally off topic, but just because you said that, we have some Nathan apparel that we're lucky enough. I think that's actually because of you that actually got us hooked up.
No,
and so every time wasn't? Okay. Every time I wear it, I'm just like, oh, look, it's Nathan's company. It's not actually, but I make fun of him.
I wore one of my Nathan shirts the other day, and some students were like, "Did you get personalized stuff?" And I'm like, "No, this is a brand. I shouldn't wear this to work."
You definitely should.
All right. Well, this other Nathan is asking about his knees, and I'm going to read their whole message here, so just bear with me. It says, "Dear Doctors of Running, I love all your content, and I'm so thankful for all you do for the running community. I have really flat feet and obviously need stability shoes, and my knees are not great, which adds to the problem of finding the best shoes. Two of the most comfortable shoes I've put on my feet are the Saucony Guide 17 and the Saucony Hurricane 24. Both work perfectly for my feet. However, both options might be terrible for my knees based on what I've read offline or online, and I don't know what I can trust online. However, after watching so much of your content, I trust what you say. Please help me, Doctors of Running. The Guide 17 is a rocker style shoe, which helps the feet, but I've read it can put extra stress on the knees. Is that correct? That the rocker style are good for feet, but bad for knees? I've had the same concern with the Hurricane 24. It's extremely cushioned, which can help foot issues, but I've read it can make your knees have to work harder. Is this correct? That extremely cushioned shoes are good for feet, but bad for knees? Lastly, what about heel toe drop? I've read that the lower the drop, the better it is for the knees. Is that correct? Also, what was the best drop for bad knees? I look forward to your response. Thanks for all you do. So I think there's a lot to unpack here. A lot of them are asking, how does shoe design impact the knee? Can I respond first for a second here?
Yeah.
Okay. I think, to my other Nathan friend, I think that the first thing I would say is there's a lot of kind of dichotomous language in your question, which just gives me insight to how you're thinking about how shoes and your body are kind of interacting, where by that I mean you're using good, bad, where something is good for one and bad for another. And I think that that's not necessarily true. I think it's, how does shoe design change demand on the knee? And then I think the further thing is, demand on the knee being higher or lower doesn't necessarily mean it's bad, as long as what you've got going on with your knees can tolerate the load that's shifted. So that's just globally my first thing to say is I think that there are some ways that we could reframe some of these questions over time, and kind of some of the assumptions too about how shoes interplay with flat feet, interplay with knees, all that kind of stuff. So that's just my first global observation, where I think you could give yourself more credit, Nathan, in that your body could maybe tolerate a little bit more than kind of this, either it's good or bad. Maybe there's a little bit of nuance in the middle. So that's where I'll stop for now, and I'll jump back in later. Go ahead, Matt.
So I would say, Nathan, to address some of your concerns, comfort is one of the best predictors of whether a shoe is going to work for you. So when you put the Guide 17 or the Hurricane 24 on, when you're putting a shoe on, don't just pay attention to your foot. Go, how does your knee feel? And if you're like, yeah, this is feeling great, I'm not having any issue, then I honestly would pick the shoe that's most comfortable and feels like it's working. And both those are really, really great options. Be aware that just because you have flat feet does not necessarily mean you need stability. But if you're finding like, yeah, these stability models are actually super comfortable and they're feeling good, then I would not overthink this, because you can definitely get in the weeds with this stuff. But when you get above them, it really comes down, because people are so different, that it really comes down to like what's going to work best for you as an individual. So if you found that stability shoes work for you, awesome. That might be a category that's going to do well for you. There are other things that might work, stable neutral, other kind of things that might give you a little bit more stable platform without necessarily being in the stability category. But comfort is going to be the biggest thing. And I think the Guide and the Hurricane are really good, tried and true models. And our Nathan picked this up really well, that there's a lot of nuances, and it's not as dichotomous as, sometimes the internet makes it seem, that there's a lot of nuance that you can have. For example, one of the things you mentioned, like, hey, drop. We know that typically a higher drop can put a little bit more stress or force into the knee joint, just because ankle might not be doing as much. You're in a little more plantar flexed or pointed foot position as you land. And so you're going to get your knee going to need to shock absorb more at your knee and hip. That's not necessarily bad. It just means forces are going to go there. If you can handle that, that might be good. Some people will find with a higher drop shoe, believe it or not, that they actually have less knee pain. Some people will find with a lower drop shoe, which typically takes force away from the knee and has to be more absorbed by the ankle. There's other people who will find a lower drop shoe actually reduces their knee pain. So you have to figure out what's actually driving your symptoms, and saying you have a bad knee, unfortunately, doesn't give us enough information. That's a very general term. We don't know what that means. And you may not know either, which is okay. There's no judgment. But know that, yes, rockers change forces typically up a little bit higher. The Hurricane doesn't have as aggressive as a rocker. The Guide has a little bit more, but it's not something that I would freak out. I would be nervous about. Both those shoes have a little lower heel drop, so that might put a little more pressure on the ankle. And cushioning, honestly, isn't necessarily joint specific. It's typically more like the whole chain, not necessarily one joint. So I'd say, to finally come to a close, pay attention to comfort and pay attention to how your knee feels. And if it feels good, I would go run and enjoy.
Yeah, I agree completely. I mean, I would look at it more from the comfort standpoint and what works for your foot. If you know you already like something and it's working, don't change it. There's not really any need to. If you really want to get into the weeds, like Matt was saying, like if you look at a heel to toe drop, it's almost like you're standing on a little slant board. Let's say you're in like a Mizuno Wave Rider and it's a 12 millimeter versus, an Ultra at 0. Like you will have a slight impact that way where you're kind of getting pitched forward, but it doesn't translate immediately. That's one component of a shoe that has many components. And so let's say you take a low drop and now you're in a 0 or you're in a more minimal Ultra versus one of the higher stack, but it's a low drop, but it's a highly rockered platform. That changes the way that shoe interacts with your foot as well. And knee, yeah. And so stack height, heel to toe drop, stable, not stable, neutral, whatever. Like all these things create a blend and an experience for the run and your biomechanics. So I wouldn't look at it as like, I feel like we're compartmentalizing these a little too much, and just focus on the experience you get on foot. That would be essentially what I would take home with this.
I totally agree with y'all. I think when you go back and try on these shoes and you're finding them that they work for you, especially if you're in a position where you're running in the Guide and the Hurricane, they feel great both for your feet and knees, and just you're having that concern of like, oh, could this be bad for my knees? I would say no. If it's not that you're running in this and your knees really bug you only when you put this shoe on, I would just kind of take what you've read online, and I would say even if the literature showed that there's increased stress in the knee or something like that, ultimately you're just learning that your body can tolerate whatever that shoe is putting through your knee. So I agree with Matt and David, and just kind of go based off of comfort and let it ride. What you said about how load shifts is true. Increased rocker might shift load up to the hip or the knee. Increased stack height may drop would shift load up to the hip and the knee. Those things can happen. And then with cushioning, when you have a highly cushioned shoe, you have overall limb stiffness, which from a knee perspective could be good or bad. It could be good because it increases your running economy, which is less energy absorption through the knee because you'll have less excursions. So there's less work done at that joint. Or it could be worse because there's slightly higher impact. So it depends on what bothers the knee or not. But I agree. I would go based off of comfort, go based off what feels good. I'd also say with the Guide too, if you're just worried about this rocker, the Guide is flexible enough where it's not really a rockered platform. Like there's enough flexibility where it's going to allow you to use that 4-foot rocker in there. Anything to add? No. All right. We're going into our next question from Christina. They asked on Instagram, what are your opinions on intentionally cutting holes in running shoes, the upper or like the liner, to customize them to your foot? Are there specific places where it's totally fine to cut a hole or where you really don't want to cut? What issues could be potentially remedied by cutting a hole in your shoe? Perhaps like cutting the top of the heel to remove pressure from the Achilles. So what are your all thoughts on cutting holes in uppers or liners?
Okay. Has anyone else done this?
Yes. Yes.
Good. Okay. I'm not the only one. That makes you feel good. Okay. Somebody else go for it. I have done. I tore apart shoes when I was in college and early PT school, modifying them in all kinds of ways. Sometimes they work. Sometimes I just wrecked the shoe permanently and couldn't return it. So I want somebody else to go first before I unload.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's anything inherently bad with making small modifications. I know some people who have issues with swelling might put like little slits in the sides of the upper sometimes, or they'll cut out little things in the insole to give them a little bit more room, let's say for the great toe or for some of the other areas. I think small modifications like that, as long as the integrity of the shoe, maintains its integrity, like I think you're pretty good. It seems pretty like a pretty innocent modification to make. If you're like Frankensteining the whole thing and the thing's barely holding itself together, maybe not, I think you just got to ask yourself kind of a platform integrity and a safety question, as to what actual modifications you're making on the shoe. Myself, we kind of used to always joke that I kind of had this unicorn foot and everything always seemed to work for me. I've never made a modification to a shoe. I've never had to.
That's
you
funny.
know, I don't know. I can't like fully speak to that on an anecdotal or like from personal experience. I think the most I've ever done is maybe change a sock liner from one shoe to another. I think that's all I've ever made a modification on a shoe. Or change the lacing up just a little bit, but that's not changing the shoe itself. So
yeah, I've done a couple, and I've also helped patients make some modifications to their shoes as well. So the ones I've done for myself have included cutting like sock liner stuff. So when I was having my foot stuff, I cut areas to relieve pressure from the bottom of the foot. In the same way, when I've had people who've had Morton's neuroma, I've cut offloading spots within the area that they're having kind of that pressure sensation. So I've done small cutouts of sock liners. I think as long as you're not doing any, when I put it on, it should feel fine. Or when patients put it on, it should feel fine. If it feels like this is awful, nope, that's not the right modification. The other thing that I've seen patients do, I haven't done this myself. Matt, you could talk about what you've done a little bit more, but cutting parts of the toe box to just widen up kind of that neck of into the toe box, or that distal part for like the big toe or the little toe, depending on what side there was a little bit of pressure. I think my only consideration for any sort of cutting of the upper is like if you completely get rid of the security of the upper, or you cut it in a way that's going to take your durability and just put it in the toilet, then is it worth it? And if it was a foreseeable thing where it's like, oh, I love this shoe, I'm just going to cut it, maybe you just get a different shoe. But I'm guessing what happens is, you get like 3 weeks into using this shoe and then you're like, this kind of bothers me. And then you make a little cut. So Matt, what have you done and what do you think?
What have I not done is kind of the better question. So in PT school, I did a less fancy version of what Golden Harper did with his shoes, where he was smart enough to put them in a microwave and warm them up so he could take the sole off. I just took a buzzsaw to a Nike Pegasus and made it a 0-drop shoe. And it kind of worked.
What?
Except it was like kind of angled.
What this question is asking.
Accidentally turned it into a wedge shoe and like gave myself some really bad like peroneus longus issues.
Seriously?
I have cut and pulled out a heel counter before out of the Asics, one of the original Hyperspeeds. With shoes that were bugging my Achilles, I would take the like heel part of like the Achilles tab and I'd slice it in half. I have cut out chunks of the upper that were pushing on my feet. I've done the like making like small slits to try to increase the volume. For patients, I go to town on insoles. I will cut them up. I will add things. There's some really awesome like pads you can get that like metatarsal lifts and things like that. You can make super easy modifications to insoles or cut part out to adjust for like varus and valgus position. So I do this stuff all the time. I just make sure I have a stock insole that I give them so they can try it first before they do it with the real one. Because David and Nathan hit this on the head. If you're going to do this stuff, you got to make sure you do not compromise the integrity of the shoe or the upper. So that's where you can run into trouble. And by the way, once you do this, you're not going to get returned this shoe. Like don't be that person, because they're going to be like, "What's wrong with you?"
Yeah, obviously.
Definitely tried to do and got this interesting note back from a not running warehouse, but a certain company going, "What the hell did you do to this?" And I was like, "It just wasn't working. This is not." They did not refund me, which they had every right to not do so. I don't know why I tried that.
Did you expect to get refunded? Like, were you like, this is their bad?
This is like college. This is like Matt 20, 21 years old, so I don't think my frontal lobe was working that well, but I was hoping. So yes, there are things that you can do. I would always encourage you to do less is more and practice on.
Wait a minute. Also, please tell me it was the Pegasus that you tried to return after bringing a buzzsaw.
No, it wasn't. It was a different shoe that I tried to cut the heel counter out of, and I was like, it fell apart, and I was like, maybe I can. No, the peg was nice because I got that for free, and I was like, well, it's free. I'm gonna, the heel's too high. I like everything else about this shoe. Let me just try something.
Was it one of the heel counter shoes where you like went and physically removed a heel counter and then sent it back and was like, hey, I don't know what happened here.
Was that in your minimalist phase?
A lot of that. Yes. That was in the minimal phase. And then as my, at one point in PT school, my Haglund deformity got really irritated. Then and my Achilles was irritated. I would cut the back just a little bit, not too much, just so it could split, because a lot of companies at that time moved away from the split Achilles tab. So it would really irritate, because it was just the rounded one that would dig in there. And so it was an easy thing that I could do very minimally and create my own split heel tab. So yes, you can do this stuff. Just, I would encourage you to practice on old shoes that you don't need. Just to make sure you master this and think less is more, but never compromise the integrity of the upper, because then you're going to start getting blisters, things are going to start sliding around, or it's going to compromise the shoe. So I would say just, this can be done. Be careful. There are some brilliant shoe cobblers out there that are amazing, who I've gotten a couple of I've met throughout the years, who do this really well professionally. So that actually might be the people to contact if you absolutely love a shoe but need something modified. Those individuals are geniuses, and they can do it without compromising the integrity of the shoe.
All right. So before we move on to our next question, I have a off-script question for you all. So it is December 1st when we're recording this. So we just got, this is the end of Thanksgiving weekend. Our family does what some people might call the very traditional meal, like turkey, mashed potatoes, stuffing, gravy, etc., etc. Is that what y'all do first? Is my first question.
Yeah.
To some extent. Okay.
Yeah.
If you have at least some familiarity with that, of that, what is one thing that you think could be completely removed forever and not be missed for you?
For me? Oh,
Yeah.
easy. Two things.
Oh, gosh.
Any kind of like mushed up like yams or like cranberry juice. I can't do those textures.
Oh,
cranberry
man.
sauce. Yeah. I have a hard time with those. Yeah. I don't know. I have a hard time with those.
The greatest conflict.
Give me all the green bean casserole, stuffing,
it's so good.
turkey,
So good.
gravy, biscuits, potatoes. Give me all of it. But those, I try every year. I try, because it's always like you get the whole plate, someone serves it, and then it's like I'm trying to be polite and be nice. But every year, yeah.
The cranberry sauce, you get rid of it. Cranberries. That's
probably the cranberries before the yams, and then the yams after that.
Wow.
I think this is going to cause like permanent divide between doctors running.
Maybe. Put it in my resignation.
This is also going to make a lot of people hate me, but I also don't like gravy, and I really haven't. So I understand it's a staple. It's just something that if I had it, I just wouldn't need it. The other thing I have to admit that I am very spoiled that my mom has made this like cranberry sauce. It's like this mix of cranberries, oranges, all this stuff that has been awesome to put on turkey. And the cranberry like gel, whatever that is from the can, I think it's gross. So that is what I would get rid of.
Ugh, you guys. The correct answer is
do you
nothing.
just like scoop it out from the can?
There. No, we make our own. We make our own sauce.
See, that's different. Like making your own is completely different. Just the can store.
Do most families make their own?
I think it's a pretty split thing. I think a lot of people like the canned stuff. We do like we boil down a cranberry sauce with like some other stuff within it. It sounds like very similar to what Matt gets, which is a very different experience than like the cut up kind of canned cranberry.
Yeah, and that's more my experience.
Yeah. When this comes out on YouTube, we're going to lose like half of our subscribers.
As I said, the correct answer is
that's some bougie cranberry sauce,
all
man.
Required. It's almost as bougie as pesto pizza for your very basic pizza.
I know I had to take a stab at that.
I felt so validated when somebody commented. If we're referring back to like a couple podcast episodes earlier. I almost
commented about the skimboarding that we were talking.
But somebody validated me by saying like, of course, somebody in SoCal is talking about pesto pizza being like the most basic pizza you could think of. It was amazing. But we're gonna move forward. Thank you for.
I didn't know that you could say nothing. That was a trick question.
Hey, I asked the question.
He's
I
just baiting us.
And I didn't. I was baiting you. So let's move forward.
Darth Nate.
We have another question from Paul. Paul is asking about trail shoes, and he says, "I have a 80K Ultra coming up in February, and I'm wanting to get some opinions and some options for trail shoes which offer a more cushioned ride. The event where I'm doing is very mountainous terrain and predominantly rocky and very hard, but very well groomed as it's a popular mountain biking route, so they don't have to be super technical. I've done the event before, and the last time the shoes, I wore were the Salomon Supercross, were more technical and grippy, but not very cushioned. So by the end, feet were very sore from fatigue. I've run in Hoka's and Brooks a lot in the past, so I know I like those, but I'm not averse to other brands. I also use orthotics to cure some of my mild overpronation and flat feet, so shoes which are friendly to orthotics would be great. I was originally thinking Hoka Speed Goats. I currently own some older model Challenger 5s, but not sure about the Brooks line, maybe the Calderas. How do the Hoka Challengers compare to the Speed Goats cushion-wise, or is there anything else you'd recommend? I also live in New Zealand, and it can be difficult to get certain models from other brands. Thanks. David, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, 80K is a long way to go. You know, the Caldera is probably fun. I was thinking the Catamount when you said Caldera. So actually,
yes,
my brain was thinking the wrong shoe. Caldera is probably fine. Yeah,
what's the other really high stacked one? What's their?
They have the Divide as well. Oh wait, but no, Caldera is higher. Caldera is the highest.
It's their longest running trail shoe.
The Cascadia.
No, Cascadia.
No,
Caldera is higher
than that. Yes, thank you. I just couldn't remember Cascadia. I'm thinking Caldera too.
But I will say Cascadia is very well known, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, that the Cascadia actually takes orthotics pretty well and has for a long time.
I was going to say Cascadia and Speed Goat were where I was going with that. But yeah, I think if you already know you like those companies, they have solid trail models, especially for longer distance stuff, you know. 80K is an odd race distance. I'm not sure I've heard of an 80K. I mean, 60K, 100K, 60 mile. I don't know. I've never heard 80K.
Yeah.
Huh. But yeah, I think those are fine.
I think the Caldera was the one that popped into my head first from Brooks. That's kind of the highest stacked, very cushioned, a little bit of a rockered ride. Definitely on the heavier end and more of like a kind of plod along sort of runner, but very nice. I think it's a pretty nice shoe. I think the other one that popped into my head from a highly cushioned standpoint are going to be more of, you got to figure out what type of cushioning you like, because the Speed Goat is great. I love the Speed Goat. It does have a lot of foam underneath, but it is firmer. Like, it's a firmer, high amount of cushioning. And if you like Hoka, but you want something that's a softer cushion, the Tectonex 3, and even if you check out the Tectonex 2, that's going to have a very significantly different, especially the 3. The 3 is a new foam compound that they have in there. Much softer cushioning in comparison to what you're getting with the Speed Goat. So I don't know how well it would take an orthotic per se, but it might be worth checking out, especially if you can. I think that it's just a lot softer in comparison to what you get with the Speed Goat. The other company that I would recommend maybe considering is Saucony. They have a number of cushioned trail shoes. 2 of them that come into my mind are the Endorphin Edge. So that's going to be their kind of PIBA-based foam, so really highly cushioned with a carbon plate in it. And then the other one that comes into my shoe is the Exodus Ultra, very highly cushioned. It's got kind of a core of PIBA, and I think that one, from my experience running in the winter, is pretty cushioned. I see that Matt clearly disagrees with me on that one, but I think that those 2, in my opinion, are the higher cushioned shoes from Saucony's line.
The only thing I would disagree with, because I'm writing a review of the Exodus 3 Ultra 3 right now, and I found it to be incredibly firm. However, I think it will actually take an orthotic really, really well. It does have that power on PB. It does not have a plate, so you don't have to worry about those interacting. What's the other non-plated PIBA foamed Saucony?
The Rift.
It's not the Edge. The Rift. Rift also might be a really,
heel sucks.
Oh, never mind.
So, right. That's my opinion. But that's my opinion.
That escalated so quickly.
Nathan,
if you want another non-company one, the New Balance Fiero is pretty good too, and it's got a little bit of volume and space to it as well. So that's a pretty solid option.
Nathan, sorry, I interrupted you.
No, you keep going. Talk about the Rift and what you think about it.
I mean,
it could be a good option. I loved the shoe. I liked the underground foot feel more, but go ahead.
I loved it a lot more than the Edge, because I found like the Edge wasn't that stable, and then the Rift kind of gave me what I was looking for. Plus the flexibility, I feel like, would take an orthotic better, and the insole is a little bit thicker in the Rift compared to the Edge. Although, when are we going to have an Edge 2? Is that going to be a thing?
I don't know. They haven't really. The only thing they've been updating is the Peregrine. That's like the only thing that I've been seeing them update. So I don't know if
Yep.
I know that they have been extending their kind of production times in a purposeful way of like making sure that their updates are real updates and not just changing the upper. Yep. So that could be part of it.
So 100% agree with you too. I think Cascadia Caldera from Brooks is great. Brooks is just a company that typically does experiment, and a lot of their shoes do work really well with orthotics. So if that's something you need, I think that's a really, really good option. I wouldn't do the Catamount because it's much more minimal, and there is a plate in there. Not that it's carbon, but I don't know how that's going to take an orthotic, and it's definitely firm.
Lower stacked.
Lower stacked.
That's like the short distance racing one.
Yeah, for sure. I think, am I forgetting? There are a couple Salomon shoes that actually do have, they're like more cushioned, but Salomon isn't the softest riding company out there, and they're typically not designed for orthotics, so that's not one I would normally suggest. Hoka, Speedgoat, and even the updated Challenger. I really like the new Challenger. I think it's got a deeper, it's a very stable neutral shoe. It's not plated. It's also one that has a thicker insole, which can take orthotics, although over ultra distances, you might want to modify your size just because Hokas do tend to fit a teeny bit more narrow. And so that one you might have to experiment with first in terms of optimizing the right size with your orthotic. And then New Balance, I think, is another good one. I really was looking forward to seeing if they had an update, but a really big favorite trail shoe of mine from them has been the New Balance More Trail V3, which it is heavy, but it's got a nice, soft, bouncy midsole. And I really was surprised. I could use that on trail, on road. It was so tall, and the insole's really thick again, so it can't take an orthotic. So I would call it the More V3 Trail from New Balance as being another really, really good option. But you got options there, and I think comfort again is going to be key. And also, as Nathan mentioned, be cautious because, just because something's higher stacked doesn't necessarily mean it's going to have the cushioning that you want. And that's the challenge. And I think, the Exodus Ultra 3 is a great example. As I'm writing the review, I was like, this is like weirdly firm. I don't feel the Power Run PB in here. That's odd. Or what was the other shoe we mentioned that's on the firmer side? Speedgoat.
Speedgoat's firmer.
That's it's great. I love that shoe.
It's great though.
It's on the firmer side, but that's also why it works for me because it's a little more stable in that regard. So,
like for Salomon, the Ultra Glide 3 is a little bit more cushioned. That was my favorite trail shoe either last year or the year before, whenever it came out. And it's firmer, but I think that the cushioning is enough and it's just so smooth where that's what I prefer. But I've never ran a 50K in anything ever. So it's not like I can say from experience, this is it. But I think, I think the ones that we've talked about are super solid.
80K is 50 miles, give or take. I'm thinking like 8K would be just shy of 5 miles, so 49 miles.
100K is 62 miles.
80K.
So it'll be around 50 miles. This race will be. What do y'all think about the Ultrafly?
That's fine.
From I think from an orthotic perspective.
Yeah.
Is the insole? I don't think the insole's removable. Somebody correct me on that. I don't.
Should I go find out?
Think it is. Maybe it is.
Yeah, if you got it right there behind you, I'd have to leave the room.
I swear I was looking at this the other day. Nate's exploring his dungeon.
Doing it live.
Yeah, exploring his dungeon to figure out which
we got there. Let's test our eyes. What can we see on that wall over there? I think I see a Fast R2.
I think is that the Ultra, the Carbon 2? Oh, it does come out. I was wrong.
Ayo.
Right. Sorry, Nike.
Ultrafly comes out. It's pretty thin, but it does come out.
All right. Do you think that could take an orthotic?
Depends on your foot size. I felt like there was ample width, but it was kind of shallow. So it depends on if you need the volume, if it's like a super thick orthotic or what. Yeah.
The plate's not that aggressive either, which is nice. Like it's stiff and it helps roll you along, but it's not like aggressively stiff.
Yeah, it's a nice
it's
a nice shoe. Yeah.
Right.
Well, there's like 30 shoes to consider. Hope that's helpful. I do think we kind of like gave some categories from higher cushioning to lower cushioning, and then what type of cushioning, where it's the super soft, where you'll get in kind of the edge super soft, in quotes, because it's trail, so it's usually a little bit firmer anyway. But you got the Edge, and you have the Tecton X, and then you have the highly cushioned but slightly firmer end, Speed Goat, Ultra Glide, Caldera, that kind of stuff. Caldera probably sits in the middle of those. But all right, anything else you want to add on this one?
No, I think we're good.
I mean, there's a few ASICS models, but unfortunately, I don't think any of us have any experience with that stuff, so I can't comment on their trail stuff.
You just ran recently in some Adidas trail stuff, didn't you? Anything fit the bill here?
Probably not. I mean, the Speed Ultra is actually, I really like it. And it doesn't have a removable insole though. So, and it's definitely midfoot's not stable. So that's not a shoe I think I would suggest for somebody with mild stability needs over that distance. The Speed does have removable insole, but the shoe is fairly narrow, and that would probably not take an orthotic very well. The Agravic is super firm, and it's not going to be cushioned at all. It might be able to take orthotic if you do a bigger size, but yeah, I don't think a lot of the Adidas models are probably going to be an option here unless there's one that I'm missing. Because those are the three that I've tried. I know that they have a few other ones that I don't know, to be honest.
Yeah, great. All right, well, let's move on to our final question for the night. This is from Tim Coleman. He's asking, hey, DRR crew, I've been running consistently for about 10 years with only a couple of issues with injury until the last 2 years, all on my right leg. I'm in my mid-30s, active job, acute care PT, shout out to acute care PTs, and strength train regularly with both dual and single leg exercises. I've noticed that on runs, my right knee seems to be collapsing more medially than my left to a degree that feels noticeably asymmetrical. There may not be a great answer, but I was curious to get thoughts regarding changes in gait mechanics over time, prompting the need for more stability or guidance through footwear. I feel I do a good job with maintenance of strength, but I have a difficulty keeping my right leg mechanics, and particularly given some of my nagging issues like SI joint dysfunction, hip flexor strain most recently. I've always worn neutral shoes, with shoes like the Saucony Ride and Endorphin Shift and Speed making up a bulk of my miles. Currently considering trialing a mild stability option based on the published DUR stability shoe guide. Thanks for the input. Yeah, go ahead, Matt.
All right. First of all, shout out to Tim, who's a neuroclinical specialist and is a boss and has been a longtime follower. So absolute shout out there. We know who you are. You're great. I would say that to address the first question, might let you to take the remainder, is that, yeah, your bodies change frequently over time. So I would definitely never get married to a certain category, especially if you're planning on running for a long time, because your body's going to change. Your foot size might change. Your mechanics are definitely going to change with be it age or anything else. Like, as males, we kind of get a little lucky, but women have massive changes that occur during before, after pregnancy, for example. There's some interesting evidence coming out with the changes that happen with menopause in terms of hormonal things that change. So yeah, like all your mechanics if you're lucky enough they stay the same throughout your life, awesome. But change is very, very normal. So don't get married to a shoe category. Instead, try to find what category is comfortable and working for you. And the one that keeps you healthy is probably the one that's going to work best for you. So if you want to try a stability shoe, I think going mild stability might be the best option, because a lot of the shoes that you mentioned are on the stable neutral, like the Shift, rest in peace. Although this is off topic, we're having a somewhat replacement, the Endorphin Trainer,
I think
Kinvara Pro. Like, what do we haven't tried the stuff yet.
We haven't tried it. Visually, It looks very much like the Kinvara Pro, which isn't quite what the Shift was.
Yeah.
They're not quite the same. Anyway,
we're still looking for our Shift replacement, by the way, too. So don't worry. But some of the shoes you mentioned are stable neutral. So a mild stability shoe might not be a bad thing to try. And I think that's a lot better than just getting really aggressive, going, I'm going to do like a max stability shoe, because we know that aggressive change is also a risk for injury. So making some mild modifications are great. And I think a mild stability shoe is great, because that's a type of shoe that often can work for people with neutral or stability needs. So I think that's a great option.
Yeah. Like Matt said, I mean, I agree with everything you said. Like, things can change over time. especially if you've had a recurrent type of like, let's say the hip flexor, the SI joint, like things where you kind of have like proximal movements where like maybe you're not extending quite as far on one side. I don't know. I can't see you, but your mechanics might change over time. You know, the way you land, the way your stride opens up, things might be a little bit different. And if you have a kind of a visceral feeling that there's an asymmetry there, and maybe you just need a little bit more support on one side, then maybe a mild stability could work. And I think of things like an A6 GT 2013. I think of like a Karhu Akoni shoes that give you just a little bit of guidance. Yeah, the fulcrum on the sideways is
no. I didn't.
You're just making faces. Yeah.
No, I just didn't like the Akoni. You just not
what?
that
You didn't totally like the Akoni? What?
That's why I didn't write the review.
Bro,
I think it's stable. I think you're totally right. I didn't like it. Sorry.
It's blasphemy.
What didn't you like about it?
I just felt like it was like the fulcrum just felt kind of clunky, and it was just, I don't know. I just wanted more cushion, and it was like a little firmer than I wanted.
It's always been firm.
It's always been firm.
It sounds like you want it to be something that it's not. Don't make the Iconi be something it's not.
Hey,
don't ask it to change. It's just being itself, man.
I know. It's like it's running it. I'm like, okay, I'm not running this show. David, somebody else got the review.
Well, if it does work for you, it actually is a really nice shoe.
Yeah, it is. I
agree. Nice enough to like probably just miss making a mark at the end of the year here for me, but it's one of my favorite trainers of the year of this year. So
it's a classic David pick.
Yeah.
So simple and so effective for him. It's great. It's great. I think a couple of the questions that don't necessarily go into the shoe realm for this question for you, Tim, but I think when I hear about types of injuries that surround low back, sacral region discomfort, maybe hip flexor stuff, so like things surrounding the hip, I think my questions go to, are some of your mechanical differences not due to strength issues, but due to some inhibition due to discomfort in the region? So then maybe the muscles of the hip that control some of the knee motion in and out in the thigh angle, maybe those have more of an interplay than just the pure strength that you're seeing. And so the mechanics changes you're noticing are related to that. And when you're doing your strengthening, I also don't know if you're just doing the strengthening and the lifting, or if you're adding kind of that neuromuscular component where you're thinking about form. I don't think that form is, and biomechanics are always king. That's not how our bodies need to function. There isn't a, quote, right way to move. However, you can train your brain and body to move in certain ways over time with specific types of practice. He knoes this better than I do because he's a neurospecialist. So I shouldn't even talk to him about this. He's like, yeah, dude, I know. But that could just be stuff to consider, the interplay of the types of discomforts you have and how that may be neuromuscularly playing into some of your movement. I also don't know if you have taken a video of yourself running from the front or from behind on a treadmill, but it might be nice to do that. And if you haven't looked it up, you could probably, through a PubMed search or something, find Brian Heiderscheidt's like 2D analysis reliability study. So he has kind of a 2D analysis form that physical therapists can use. And you could use that to see, are there meaningful biomechanical changes, or is it more perception? So that's always my other question when people feel differences. Is it differences you're feeling, or is it differences that can be seen? Because I think those are also different as well, because perception and movement are two different things when it comes to stress on the body. So I have lots of thoughts in that realm, but I don't have any actionable things because obviously we're not working together one-on-one. What were you going to say, Matt?
This is also not a diagnosis and the kind of similar thing, but I would also, just based on the locations of symptoms, make sure, and this is a top-down versus bottom-up approach, but I would just double-check lumbar spine, because a lot of the stuff in the lower lumbar, if it's annoyed or stiff, like oftentimes stiffness may not get better with strength training. You might actually need to work on some mobility and get things moving a little bit more, because a lot of those lower facet joints can certainly refer symptoms and cause some inhibition and stuff down there at what might appear, because it's a common referral to what seems like an SI joint, or can cause some inhibition to some of the deep hip rotators, which may or may not. I'm not diagnosing, but just saying I would double check and go through your like basic lumbar range of motions and see if you can reproduce anything, and try to, again, figure out like strength is really important, but it doesn't necessarily treat every single thing. most effectively. Strength is going to be the best thing from an injury prevention standpoint, from a resilience standpoint. But when you're looking at some tissue changes like this, make sure you've got the right intervention you need to address this. And whether it's motor control, as Nathan was mentioned, which is going to be something definitely in your wheelhouse, or trying to figure out, I think you have some very good options, and which one you choose to go through, I think, is going to be positive regardless.
100% agree. All right. So, anything else before we sign off for the day, gentlemen?
Are we going to have a surprise last question?
I was going to come up with one, but my mind went blank. So I've got nothing. So if someone else wants to spring a question on us. Should we do
another pizza question? Or
can't do pizza. David's too fancy for that.
We could do an action sports question.
Please, no.
Because Nate, that's Nate's world over there.
But then I'm going to sit here and just awkwardly, I don't know. Let's see.
I don't know. Oh, man.
Can I do something absolutely blasphemous?
Is it air friendly?
Yeah, it is. But I might. it's friendly. It's appropriate. But this might cause enough issues. I might get kicked off DOR.
Okay, I think we're fine. Let's go for it.
So if you had to describe Thanksgiving meal as a pizza, what would that pizza be?
No, this is so dumb.
I said this might be blasphemous, so, just try to follow.
It's a supreme pizza. It's got a lot of toppings, a lot of things going on, and it's all on the same plate.
That's a good answer. I thought you were going to say pesto.
All right, I actually have a question because I think have you? Well,
BJ's going to edit that out.
Yeah, we don't really edit much of this.
No,
and BJ's like, yes, I do. Y'all just don't know.
Does a great job, by the way.
So, have you both been testing the Hoka that we were sent?
Which the Mach X2?
Mach X2.
I have
that came in right before I left for Thanksgiving, so I have not run in it yet. I got back last night.
Yeah. I have 50 miles in it. I've done every type of workout in it, and I just did a comparison video review between version 1 and version 2.
Okay, so what I want to hear from you, Matt, is I know you compared version 1 to version 2, but where do you compare it to in terms of other brands, like the most comparable shoe, other brands where it fits a similar kind of training companion categorical shoe where it's lighter weight, plated training shoe?
I definitely see it fitting in the super trainer category, but there's two subcategories of that now. There's your heavier super trainer that's got the max stack height and the cushioning, whatever, blah, blah. And then there's the lighter group. And the most common shoe that people are going to know is going to be the Super Blast, which I know is not plated, but that shoe is stiff as all belief. So I honestly see the Mach X2 fitting very similarly to a shoe like the Super Blast 2 or the Mizuno Wave Neo Vista, which I know isn't the stiffest shoe, but it's also plated, and I know it's super fun, but that's just a bouncy ride that's a little bit lighter in that high 8 to low 9 range. That's really, really bouncy, that can be used as a daily trainer and as a workout shoe. And honestly, it's going to be a really great long distance race shoe for a majority of the public. And I think it's a great alternative and better option than a lot of the super shoes out there. So those are kind of the two that stuck out to me most, being the really high stack height, more not fully, but a little more super foam and a little stiffer ride is kind of where I'm seeing that faster super trainer fit in.
Perfect. Well, thank you everybody for joining us on this podcast journey. I also want to thank both of you for the friendships over the last however many years now, 5 years since Matt, you asked us to come join DOR. It's been a fun community for me. So part of my Thanksgiving sort of reflections included thinking about DOR and what this has been for me professionally, socially, and for our family too. There's been a lot of really cool things that have come from this, and just thankful for you both, thankful for Bach and Andrea and BJ. I think we have just such a cohesive and fun team, and it makes this side gig really, really fun. So thank you both. And to everyone who's been on this journey with us, it helps make it worth it, being able to interact with you all and to help us continue to do things that we hope are helpful to you. That's why we do this, is we want to create content and knowledge, ways to hear about ideas in ways that are helpful for people. So thank you for joining along with us. It's always super humbling for us to have people care about the words we say and the words that we write and the things that we try to put out there. So we are super thankful for all of you. So I know this will come out a couple weeks after Thanksgiving, but hopefully we can still be in a thankful spirit at the time, and hope you all have a great rest of your day.